most important aspect of the innovation culture and the workplace for leadership, and in order to really do what they're planning to do, and they're just trying to not miss the opportunities, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is what again, I go back to I'm going to answer this based on the 90% of companies who
Mm-hmm.
are just starting. I think that don't underestimate, like, there's not one important thing, but I think number one, don't underestimate the why. Like, why are we doing this? And let me just story tell you really quickly. As you and I know, because we play with exponential technologies. Well, once the world starts understanding what impact, not just blockchain and 3D printing and spatial computing, and you can start getting into quantum, all these things. Once they realize actually, like automation, what that's going to do to jobs, people will start fearing they're going to lose their job. And really,
They already do.
and they already do, right? And it's
Yeah.
only going to accelerate. And so what we know is that when people feel that loss, and some people even lose hope, I'll never have a job again, really, really bad things that history tells us happens when people lose hope. And so one of the starting points, I don't want to get too philosophical, but I'll be more pragmatic in a second, but I really don't think you can underestimate telling the why and the story of where you're going. Because most of these people, I believe, will be either redeployed or they're going to be reskilled or upskilled to have new jobs, just different jobs. And so if you don't tell that story, you're just telling the story about, if we're going to innovate, the world's moving so fast, we got to automate, blah, 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 you're going to get a disconnect throughout your organization, possibly. So I think that's a big thing, right? So some of the other important things is, like, make sure, talk about compassion, human-centered, look at your people. Right? Lead them and teach them and guide them, invest in them, communicate with them ongoing through this journey, I think is so powerful. Measuring what matters. I think there's so much vanity metrics out there today about what is innovation and what is agile, and that is, you really got to distill down what you're measuring for success. Otherwise, you could be going after the wrong things. But I think that there's so many aspects. I think the big thing, which we'll get to later maybe, is that innovation's not going to happen because you preach at the top to be innovative. I mean, we started that with the beginning. Innovation's about creating a culture, democratizing innovation, spreading it across your organization. I think that too often companies think, let's put it in the strategy and we'll be innovative.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the way that is seen is very much like a new venture within what you're doing right now, in the same processes, in the same way of thinking. It's just another department, I would say, and it's not something that is holistic in that sense. And therefore, sometimes you see that their expectations is like we did this or that, we're going to do another thing, and it doesn't work this way. No. They need to be more involved. And I think that this is the main reason that they are finding it really difficult, because after all, when we're talking about change in general, people don't like change, and they don't like to change. And what it brings is usually the unknown, the fear of the unknown. And it's very, very hard for people to do in general. It doesn't have to be in the business. It doesn't have to be in the old company. It needs to be like even in their own lives. Change is hard.
So let me dig into that then. If change is hard, which we all agree it is, and we're now living in the fastest time in the history of our world, like it's exponential growth, is there not a problem there? Potentially. Yes. So when I talk about democratization, I'm not just using the term democratization because it's fancy. Let's just really unpack that. Here's the difference. At organization A, leadership says we need to innovate, we create a lab, we're going to adopt technologies, blah, blah, blah. That's number A. And then change happens and the rest of the organization says, oh my gosh, I lost my job. What are we doing? Oh my gosh, I'm stressed. Okay, that's a little different than organization B. What if you played the game where you said, here's why, like I described before, here's a journey that we're going on, and you're all on it with us. And so we're doing ideations and hackathons throughout the organization. We're breaking down the silos. Like there's so many best practices around innovation that go beyond a lab and ecosystem collaborations, right? You can actually go in and start breaking down these silos that you talk about, solve problems together, introduce. I'm a big fan of introducing exponential technologies in a very non-intrusive way to team, just so they can see and touch, like VR or 3D printing. Why does that matter, Addie? Because when the change happens, and we know it's going to happen faster than they think, that you've already socialized it in your organization. They said they're not surprised by the spatial computing because they played with it as part of a team event a month ago or a year ago. They're not surprised that some jobs are lost because actually they helped to co-design that new future in a hackathon together. So they embraced it. And the more you can get your whole organization, not just speaking the language, but actually innovating, experimenting, learning to fail and learn like from it, that's when the change happens, the big change, they're ready for it. That's what I mean about democratizing ideas. Well, actually, number one, your best ideas are not coming from executives anyway. They're coming from your front line, the people who actually work with customers. They're coming
Yeah.
up with this innovation. So that's why democratizing works. Everyone is creative if you give them a chance. But it's just as much about letting everyone play and understand how the world is moving so that when it happens, they're more ready for it.
Yeah, it's more a way of thinking, like in the whole organization, in something which is more general than just a unit or a department of something which is very specific. And the fact that you're opening your employees to things that might not look relevant, maybe they are, maybe they are not. They're just opening the mind of what could be. And currently, it's like the opposite of what currently you expect them to only think about their role in their position and do something very narrow. Before we continue, I want to say thank you to Eric. He loves your idea of why. Absolutely agree about sharing your why. It adds to greater transparency and mitigates friction, which
Yeah.
is really important. I
And
think
I
that
just in mind, sorry, Addie, go ahead.
no, you can continue.
Well, you said about mindset, right? So a lot of us are talking still about the growth mindset. It's real. Like, and so like when you're transforming your business, we use two languages. Number one, you've got to change the mindset of your organization and create new muscles or new muscle memory, right? Like if you think of an athlete, if you throw the ball 10,000 times, then your body just knows how to throw the ball. This is what we're going through today. We are fundamentally changing the mindset and muscle memory of an organization. If we go back 10 years ago, Addie, you remember a lot of these larger organizations who had the balance sheet, the dollars to create the innovation labs. What was their push? What was the feedback? In most of them, I would argue, the feedback was number one, we couldn't replicate the startup mindset and culture. And so they ended up just building stuff that not at the pace at which a true startup who was scrappy and who actually didn't have money behind them had to do. And the second thing was, even if they were successful, they created the mindset with only within that lab. And the broader organization said, well, what about the rest of the organization? We're no different than we were 5 years ago. It was only the lab. So I'm not saying labs are dead. I'm saying that the learning was you can't isolate, as you said, mindset shifting and new muscles to one portion of the organization. How do you bring it everywhere? And this is what our company does.
Yeah, like when you said that, it makes sense to me to think about, like it's like an organization. Like everything is dependent on everything. So you cannot just one section say, okay, you're doing exactly everything as you've done like for 10, 15 years, and there is like very small portion of doing things differently. Because if we really want to succeed, and maybe one of these the lab startups was very good, how would they incorporate their ideas and really grow from the whole system, which is the whole organization? If they collide when they meet, let's say they did something and it was very good, would it grow? And most of the time the answer would be no, because they don't have the capacity to join forces with this bigger organization and really grow from it. So
That's right.
everybody needs to understand the growth mindset. And I think that what's good with the concept of growth mindset is understanding it's always changing. It's always growing. It's not like you got to a certain like level, or now that you're a manager, now you're C-level. That's it. I came to the place. Now I can rest. Now I just need to do my job. That's it.
Yeah,
Like
we're lifelong learners. Like we're at the world's moving way too fast, and that's the urgency around innovation, right? Is that 20 years ago you could say, okay, I get this, let's start dabbling. We don't have time, and I don't mean that to scare people listening. What I'm saying is that if the world is moving this fast, we have to immediately, starting now, start to transform the mindset and muscle memory of our organizations, because the world's moving too fast. We have to embrace, like you said, growth mindset and lifelong learning. We're all going to be lifelong learners.
I think that it could be scary, but on the other side, when you think about it, people have so much talents and they have so many capacities and they are not using these strengths in their work. So if you could utilize all of these in order to grow yourself within the organization and grow the organization, it's like,
Yes. This is again going back why I keep going back to the old industrial age mindset of command and control. I'm the boss. I know best. I've worked here longest. I tell you what to do. Those days are so gone. Like people, if you just have to adapt, all you got to do is a few ideation sessions, or we call these non-technical hackathons, whatever it is. If you truly embrace this and allow anyone in your organization to be innovative, you will be blown away by what they come up with. Every person has creative, every person in this world. It's just you have to unlock it, and the best companies are the ones that unlock it throughout their whole organization.
yeah. So we have a question which is like challenging, I guess. Anna asks you, what is your definition of innovation?
Oh, so Anna, that's a good question. I've been actually
Thanks,
challenging
Anna.
myself with this question myself for some time. Let me answer it in this way. I think what innovation is not is necessarily a fundamental shift in the way you do things. Like we use language like incremental innovation. So in theory, innovation is doing something new that adds value to your stakeholders. Like that would be my short answer. Like it's got to be new. And if it doesn't offer value, it's not innovative. Where I digress a bit, Anna, I think her name was, is
Yeah.
that we got to think about innovation. Quite often we think it's, big, big changes. And I think that every company should have moonshots, at least 10% of their innovation capacity going through moonshots, no expectation of ROI. But there's also nothing wrong for the 90% of companies out there who we call fast followers, who are making constant incremental innovation. Why? Because if we're talking about changing a mindset and creating new muscles, then isn't it better to have your entire organization, like 80% of it, constantly improving? That idea of Kaizen, constant improvement, constantly trying new things, experimenting and failing, and bringing new value to your stakeholders? I think the answer is yes. So the answer, again, like I said, the definition I use is something new that offers value, but don't think it has to be some profound innovation. I think incremental innovation is a good strategy for many, for
Yeah.
most.
Thanks, Anna, for your question. And I think that I would just add something to it, is understanding change. As I see it, innovation is understanding, as a human being, as an organization, as a company, just understanding that everything is moving all the time. It's moving, and you cannot do anything. You cannot just resist it, because you're not controlling what's going on in your competitors, in the world around you, in technology, with people mind, and we feel it much more right now. Like in the past, we should have just explained what change is, and within COVID, we don't need to explain anything. Like everybody understands that this is like how the things could change without even thinking about it. So you need to, sometimes they say embrace change, but I think it's really hard to embrace something that you're trying to resist, but really understand it and see what could be done within this context. And I think that many organizations are doing the other way around, trying to, like, there is this, I wrote a book, Innovating Through Chaos, and I'm talking about chaos in general as something which is unfamiliar. And there is this quote: when wind of change come, some people build walls and some people will build windmills. So just understanding that you need to be this way, and to understand the way that you're operating in the world as a human being. You can resist change, but you will lose.
And
That's
I
what
love
happens.
that. I would call that the definition of an innovative mindset versus what innovation is. But I agree. I 100% agree. There are multiple camps here.